Welcome to Mediumship Sparks, where we connect more deeply with spirit and source and follow the sparks of insight and inspiration that bring us greater awareness, healing, and just more flow into our lives. I'm Noelle Dean, intuitive medium, licensed therapist, and your host. A quick note before we begin: this podcast is for educational purposes only and provides general information. It is not medical or psychological advice and is not a substitute for care from a licensed health professional. I'm so grateful we get to step into this together. Let's dig in. How are you doing, Audra?
I'm good. It's early in the morning here. I'm currently in Southeast Asia. I'll be moving back to the US in just over a week.
Big move. How long have you been in East Asia?
3 years. We moved overseas 13 years ago. My husband and I are teachers. We're international school teachers. This is the 4th country that we've lived in, and now it's time to go back.
You must have so many experiences, such different cultures, and then you acclimate another different culture. Interesting. Yeah.
It's definitely a culture shock every time we've moved, but we've learned so many things that we wouldn't have learned otherwise. And for me, that's actually part of my story, is when I moved overseas, then I was able to zoom out and see things with a bird's eye view. And I had that physical space to be able to start to see it really for what it was.
Wow.
Yeah.
Perfect segue into you introducing yourself and why you're here today. And I'm really excited to talk to you. You have helped to open my eyes to dive into a whole rabbit hole of stuff. So please tell us about yourself, Audra Phelps.
Yeah, I'm currently transitioning careers. So I have been in international education for the last 13 years, been a teacher and now school director. But my real passion is helping moms who have left the Mormon church. I grew up Mormon and was in a very strict Mormon household. And it was years and years of basically learning to distrust myself. I was the one in Sunday school, like, that doesn't make any sense. I was told that my doubts were sinful. And if I had a doubt, that it was because I didn't have enough faith. And that was Satan tempting me. And so I needed to read my scriptures more and pray more because I needed to make my will the Lord's will. So those things were repeated to me ad nauseum growing up. And what that taught me was that any kind of feelings or emotions I had were wrong and needed to be buried and pushed down. I didn't realize the damage of that because it was just, yes, you're right. I need to be more righteous because I don't want my eternal salvation to be put into question because I'm doubting. And the life in the church is very prescribed, especially as a woman. Your path is very straight and narrow. You know exactly what your purpose is, and that is to get married in the Mormon temple and then have children and grow the kingdom of God. That was my purpose. I moved into that life and I did all of that. I had a temple marriage. I'm still married to the same person. So for us, it really worked out. I got married at 20. I had only known him for 6 months when I got married and started having kids right away. So I had my oldest when I was only 22 years old. I was really a baby raising a baby, but it's what everybody was doing. Everybody my age was getting married, having babies. I had 3 kids, and fast forward a little bit, I was living in Idaho at the time. And my first real sign that something was off was I was having severe anxiety and depression to the point where I was having panic attacks like almost every day. And I couldn't figure out what it was. And it wasn't until after I really left the church that I figured out what it was. Now, looking back, I recognize that was my body screaming at me that I was living in a life that was not aligned with who I was. I didn't recognize it for what it was. I thought I should try antidepressants or I should try some different methods. I didn't really know the cause of it all, right? I was doing everything that I was told would bring happiness. I was doing everything that a righteous woman in the church does. I was reading my scriptures. I was a stay-at-home mom, even though I desperately wanted to work. I was told, no, you're a nurturer. Your place is in the home. But I was doing everything they told me to do and still just really struggling. Through some other experiences, I realized that I was very dependent. I was very dependent on the church for everything and dependent on my husband for the finances of the family. And we were living in Idaho. He was a teacher. We didn't make that much money, so we were pretty poor. We would go to the church for financial help sometimes. I was grateful for that help, but that help also came at a price, and it made me feel very worthless, like I was nothing without the church. One thing that experience taught me was I'm not going to be dependent on anyone again. So I made the decision to go back to school. I was courageous enough to say, okay, I'm going to go back to school and I'm going to have something for me. I had 3 kids at this point, but wasn't quite courageous enough or aware enough to make a career decision that was really what I wanted to do. It was all about, okay, if I'm going to have a career and I'm going to work, it's going to be something that's really best for the family. It's got to suit the family. And so I became a teacher because what's the most benign job a Mormon mom can have? Have the same schedule as my kids. No one was going to look at me sideways for being a teacher. And then, so that started to give me some independence. I started to have something that was just mine. And I was a high school biology teacher. I loved science. So that part of it was fun. Then we got turned on to the world of international teaching. And we knew that we really wanted our kids to have a broad worldview. We wanted our kids to have a variety of different experiences. But as 2 teachers in Idaho, we wouldn't have been able to provide a lot of that for them. So when we found out about these American private schools overseas, and I can teach biology, and it's not just teaching English, right? We sold everything that we owned except for 2 suitcases per person. And we moved to a country we'd never been to before. We went to Kazakhstan, which is not exactly a common country that most people move to. But what that did for me is it gave me this separation from the church. I was able to start paying attention to the messages that I was receiving in the church and the Mormon monoculture. It's very insular. Your whole life is prescribed for you, what you eat, what you drink, what you do on Sundays and Mondays and Wednesdays and Saturdays, and what your social circle is and all of that. It keeps you very busy and always connected with other members of the church. When I was overseas and totally come out of that, I could start to recognize the messaging and start to analyze it. I was so caught up in the minutia of everyday living, of the expectation of a Mormon wife and mother, that I couldn't make sense of it until I had that physical separation. The other thing moving overseas did for me was it gave me so many experiences with other cultures and other religions that didn't match what I was told when I was in the church. And I would go to a Hindu temple in India and see these dedicated people who were there. And I would think, gosh, I thought Mormons were the most dedicated. Then I would go to a Catholic cathedral and it would feel spiritual and sacred. And I was like, I thought Mormons were the only ones that had sacred places. I thought these other places were based on evil and they were wrong, but I didn't feel that way at all. Going to a Zoroastrian temple or a Muslim mosque and seeing people so dedicated and committed to their faiths made me go, oh, there is a whole other way of doing life out here. And who am I to say that they're wrong? I can't say that, even though I was taught that. So it was really a slow erosion of a lot of experiences, slowly learning to start listening to myself and paying attention to how things felt. And then it gave me the courage. The straw that broke the camel's back for me was 2 years after we'd been overseas, the church came out with a policy that children of gay parents would be considered apostates of the church and would not be able to receive the blessings of the church. They framed it as love and protecting children. Because of all of my life experience, all of my questioning, my time overseas, when they came out with that statement, I immediately wanted to throw up. I thought, this isn't love. This is hate. If that had come out 10 years prior, I probably would have just fallen right in line. But I could see it for what it was. I remember just standing up, walking upstairs, going into my bedroom. I took off my Mormon garments and I looked at myself in the mirror and I said, I am not Mormon. And even all those years of questioning, that was the one sentence I could never say because it was I am. It was identity. That was the deepest part of me. I said those words and I had so much certainty. And I felt like the whole world just opened up into a million stars. I felt so light and airy. That's the quick overview of my experience of leaving the church, deconstructing my faith and realizing that I had been conditioned to fall in line and obedience was number one. If I wasn't obedient, then something was wrong with me and I needed to fix me. When I left, it was so lonely. I was grieving a lot of things. It doesn't go over well with family, loss of community, but also loss of self. I knew what I wasn't, but I didn't know what I was. I was raising my kids at the same time, and that was petrifying because my kids were ages 9, 11, and 13 when I left. The church gave me a blueprint of exactly how to be a mom, exactly how to raise kids, what age they should date, so specific that now what am I going to do? Because I can't even figure out who I am. How am I going to figure out how to raise my kids? It was really scary. That was 11 years ago. Moms that are leaving now, I know what they're going through and I know I can help. That's what I've been doing, coaching women after they've left, work through these emotions so they can come to a better place. You don't have to stay stuck in that anger, that hurt, that confusion, right?
Like the grief part of it.
That one's huge and that one still rears its head. Right? I've heard it described as waves in an ocean. The wave comes and then it recedes, but the ocean keeps giving waves.
They slow down, they get smaller. You've answered so many of my questions because you covered a lot of really great emotional territory. The idea of being raised to have a very clear sense of who you are, who you should be, who you should strive to be, period, no question.
Yeah.
And you choose to step away from all of that. As I was sitting with your perspective and coming from, let's say, this post-Mormon, let's say an inner revolution, you could also liken that to people who've come from abusive families or families related to alcoholism or other substance abuse and addiction, where children have a prescribed role. It's not exactly what you're describing. What you're describing is the whole world that you lived in, according to you and your family, was the church and its tenets and its beliefs and its norms and its requirements, and the natural process of you becoming curious and using your own discernment and questioning authority and how shut down you are. Some of that could be likened to other cultures, other religions, other types of families kind of thing. How shocking that was when you stepped into other cultures. You also sound like somebody who is very somatic, very connected to your body. And you had these visceral responses to being in these other spiritual, religious places that you were told were maybe evil or not as clean and pure as what you ought to believe. And that sense of actually listening to yourself must have been profound, that you could actually let yourself really feel and hear what your body was telling you.
Yeah, exactly. I could let myself, and I could let myself because I had the physical separation from the church.
Yeah.
There was nobody right next to me with the negative talk in my ear, and I could actually sit with it.
Wow. Big difference. So here's a question for you. How long have you been helping other women detox from the socialization and rebuild themselves? Because you would have had to have a level of, I don't want to say mastery, but maybe mastery. How long have you been helping
Yeah.
other people?
I've been helping other people for about a year now,
Okay.
just part-time because I'm wrapping up my career here
Mm-hmm.
overseas. It's now the end of our school year and we actually have graduation today. So
Oh.
it's the end of my school year and I'm closing the book on this chapter of my life. So I've been helping women part-time for about a year, but now I'm moving back to the US and I'm going to do this full time because I see the need and I see how powerful this work can be and how transformational it can be. But it's taken me the detox,
Mm-hmm.
really, as you describe it. And that's still happening. There's still things that I uncover that I'm like, oh, why was I triggered by that? Okay, there's something that needs to be healed there that I haven't peeled back yet, basically. But I would say about 3 years ago for me, what really turned me on to this is what I want to do is I was, I'll give you a very simple story, but I think it illustrates the point really well. I'd already been out of the church about 8 years, and I was making Thanksgiving dinner for my family, and I still had the perfectionist Mormon mom in me and a bit of the trad wife in there as well. So it was like everything has to be from scratch. We're
Wow.
gonna have all the sides, everything. I'm gonna make it all. So I'm making pie, the crust from scratch, and I make it the night before. So I'm making apple pie in the kitchen. I'm cutting the apples, and I'm finding myself feeling really resentful that I'm making apple pie and I'm spending all this time in the kitchen. Oh, why am I making apple pie? Why am I making apple pie? I don't even like apple pie. Then why am I making apple pie?
Mm.
Because it's my husband's favorite. And so I have made apple pie every single year. So then I was like, he always gets his favorite every year. What's my favorite? And I didn't even know. Like, I really didn't know. I had spent, at this point, I was in my mid 40s. So I'm like, I had spent over 40 years making sure everybody else was okay. Everybody else was happy. Everybody else had what they wanted. That it wasn't even making sure I had something I wanted. I didn't even know what I wanted. That sent me down a really dark rabbit hole of what I call
Mm.
grieving the life unlived. So I went down what would
Mm-hmm.
my life have been like if I didn't get married so young or married someone else? What would my life have been like if I had kids later in life or didn't have kids at all? What would my life have been like if I had chosen a career that was something I really wanted to do? And those are some heavy questions,
Mm-hmm.
right? At the time, I came across a woman on Instagram. She was a coach, and like all of her posts, I was like, oh my gosh, she's seeing into my soul. And she had this program that was all about making the decision of whether to stay or go in your marriage. I stalked her for a while, but that was the biggest question for me, and I couldn't make sense of it. I felt like a ping pong ball on a ping pong table, like back and forth, yes, no, and I couldn't make sense of the emotions. So I contacted her, I joined her program, and it was totally different than I expected it to be. It wasn't just, okay, we're going to make a pros and cons list and which decision looks best for you. It was diving into identity. Let's figure out who you are. Let's get into your body. Let's pay attention to your intuition. Let's observe your emotions and find those emotional triggers. Let's figure out what emotion you're in and see if we can get you to a better feeling emotion. That work was transformative for me because even though the purpose of the program was stay or go in your marriage, I was unraveling what I call the inner Mormon critic that was still in my head that I thought I had dealt with. There was still so many layers I needed to uncover. And I was living based on some of these conditioned beliefs of what I thought a good mom was, what I thought a good wife was, what made me a good person. And those were definitions that were given to me from the church.
Mm-hmm.
Those were not definitions that were mine. At the end of the program, I made the decision to stay with my husband. I was 100% sure of that. And I made the decision from a place of peace. I chose him over 20 years ago. I still choose him today. And as I was talking to my coach, and she was like, okay, what's next for you? I said, I think I'm also in a career that needs to change. She said, okay, what kind of things do you like about the job you have now? And what do you think you might want to do? And I said, I really loved working with the students when they would come into my classroom and kind of download all their problems onto me. And I really liked when I moved into administration that parents would come into my office and ask for support with their kids. How do I handle this situation? Or my child is struggling. I really liked the coaching aspect of my job. And I said, the work that I've done in this program has been so transformational. I can see the power of coaching. And she said, what demographic do you want to work with? And I was like, oh gosh, I don't really know. And she said, have you ever thought of working with other ex-Mormon moms? And again, I had the full body reaction. I burst into tears and I was like, that's it. When I left, it was like I was on the other side of the world and I didn't know anyone else who had left. So I was trying to explain to my friends the emotions I was going through, and they didn't really get it. They didn't even know what Mormonism was. I found myself explaining Mormonism at the same time explaining my emotions around leaving it. I did a coaching certification program for NLP practitioners. So I am trained as an NLP, which stands for Neuro Linguistic Programming Coach. I've started working with women full time. And now I have a full program that's launching soon, group coaching, individual coaching, and a curriculum to help them walk through all the different layers that come with deconstructing, but mostly reconstructing and finding out what's next.
Love that. What is the difference really when you're breaking out of this mold that you were so cast in and everything about your life fit into that? And then you're trying to recreate this new life that actually feels true to you. I'm sitting in the idea of that. And is it freedom? Is it terrifying? What do you keep? What do you throw away? How do you discern that for yourself to try to do that from a place that's actually clean, not still carrying some of the judgment and the morality that was imposed on you?
That honestly, that's the hardest part. And that's a lifelong process. I still do that. I would say the first thing I start to talk to women about is, like we were saying, listen to your body. Because if you ask a woman, okay, what is it that you want then? Let's dream big. That's daunting. They've never been allowed to dream. They don't know. Like my Thanksgiving pie story. You ask them what they want for dinner, and they're going to say, I don't know. What do you want? Or it depends on what the kids want. They can't figure out what they want for dinner because they have had so many years of paying attention to everyone else's needs that they first have to start super small, learning to pay attention to those feelings in their body. If something feels expansive and open and light, then it's a yes. If something feels constrictive and tight in their throat, then it's a no. But they have to practice that with little things. You're driving in the car and you can take two different ways home. Which way feels good? Start practicing that, because if you can't make it those decisions, if you can't pay attention for the little things, then those big things are not going to be a familiar process for you. And paying attention to your emotions. So when you start to feel something has triggered you and you feel constrictive, there's probably a belief there that's not aligning with who you are. And your well-worn pattern is just to say yes anyway, even though your body is saying no. But there's some kind of a belief there that's not aligning with you. What is really powerful is journaling and taking the time to sit with old-fashioned, put your phone away, old-fashioned paper and pencil so that you have the processing time as you're writing, to ask yourself some specific questions. What is the feeling that I have here? Where is this coming from? What is the belief that I have? And usually the belief goes back to some definition of a good mom that you're not living up to. Pay attention to what the belief is and then start poking holes in it. When did I decide that? Who gave me that belief? If it didn't come from you, then it came from an outside source, and it's probably not a belief that's yours. Then let's start rewiring your brain that this is not an absolute truth. Is this always true? Is there ever a time this is not true? Working through those questions to rewire so that belief is not the immediate pattern, and then finding a belief that feels good, that feels expansive, that feels open and light, and creating a new pattern for you. And that's a process that I do multiple times a week because you're going to be triggered. There's going to be times where you feel frustration or anger, and okay, where's this coming from? And so it's a very deliberate process, but it's transformational.
I talk a lot about self-trust and the idea of creating your own discernment and feeling out what feels right. Different kind of process, but the same process. So you're talking about this way of self-reflecting and dissecting these reactions, these responses. I've been sitting in this information. Like I said at the beginning, you opened up this rabbit hole as I'm preparing to have this conversation, a culmination of things I've been sitting with about my own life, as well as what I look to bring to the podcast and in conversations that I have with people. And it's dissecting these ways that we have come to expect ourselves to behave, because that's what we were taught. Maybe it was being a good girl, being a good Mormon wife. There's so many expectations embedded in who we are. And it's like we have to reach in and pull something out when we feel it, something clanking inside. I don't know what it is. And then you pull it out and really look at it, hopefully without judgment of yourself, to understand, where does it come from? What is this pattern? How did I learn this? What can I take from this? How do I let this go? How do I unravel these pieces of myself? Because it will feel like it's you.
Yeah.
Even though it's not. And then figuring out what actually is you and letting these other things slough off over time. I can appreciate about you, Audra, that you waited 10 years dissecting this stuff for yourself before the idea of being equipped enough to support other people. Because in the work I've done and I'm still doing on trying to be this more authentic version of myself, I don't even know exactly what that means. It's this evolutionary process that I'm trying to be in, and it's sloppy and clumsy sometimes. But what I'm noticing is this sense of being in my own skin as a person that I've never felt, and I didn't even know to strive for. And I feel for you and other people that are raised in truly like a community. It's one thing to be in a dysfunctional family, and you can look at other families or even watch TV and see shows, even though it shows some idealized version of something, but it shows you a different perspective that you can look at your own life and be like, wait a minute, what the? But for you to be so surrounded and completely indoctrinated into a whole way of living and lifestyle, I can't imagine how daunting that must have been, and how daunting it is for women who are just now at the beginning of this and would be so grateful to have you as their escort or Sherpa. That next step, it's going to feel huge, because your identity is wrapped up in these 16 different things. And how do you unravel all of that? That's just so much work to become this other version of who you actually are. Very different from who you were told to become.
It is so much work. When I first start working with women, I say, you have to be willing to look at the hard things. You have to be willing to process the grief and feel it, because those, especially in the church, like a lot of those lower feeling emotions like grief or anger, those were also considered sinful, and you wanted to hide them and push them down. You're going to want to feel it, because feeling it, you're going to learn from it, process it, move it out of your body. And then the next time you feel it, it'll feel lighter, better. That's how you can get to a higher moving place. Because if it stays stuck, you're not going to break free from it. You're not going to learn from it. You're not going to find the lesson and eventually be grateful for it. I know some people hate it when I say that, but you can get to that point. And when you're in the midst of it, you're like, grateful. I'm never going to be grateful for this experience. But I have now gotten to the point I can look back, and the person I have become because of that experience, I could have not have become any other way. I have so much more compassion and empathy than I ever had before. I can recognize manipulation very quickly now where I couldn't recognize it before. I've learned how to pay attention to my body. And if I hadn't have gone through that process of losing myself for 35 years and then finding myself again, I don't think that I could have recognized the beauty in that so much.
I love that you say that. That's how it feels with every big thing that happens in our lives when we're in the middle of it. And we want to be really careful when you're not the one in the middle, but your friend is, and be like, oh, you're going to feel so grateful later.
Yeah,
That,
exactly.
that's nobody's place to say that kind of thing. When you're in the middle of anything that's really tough, it can be very hard to be grateful because you can't imagine who you're going to become on the other side of that experience. You're
You
not there.
can't go from anger and grief straight to gratitude. There's
Yeah.
20 emotions in the middle. Just like my leaving the church went from A to Z and I had to do every letter, you have to go step by step, one higher emotion at a time from grief until you can get there. And that's not an overnight process either. One of the biggest things is starting to observe your emotions without judgment. What emotion am I in? What is it I'm feeling? Where is this coming from? What emotion do I want to be in? How can I get one level up? How can I go from grief to resentment? How can I go from resentment to hurt? How can I go from hurt to doubt?
Yeah.
How can I go and just you just slowly work your way up to a higher emotion?
At first it felt, oh, reinventing who. No, that's not quite it. What you're describing is becoming who you really are. And you don't even know who that is because you have not met her yet.
I love
That
that.
sounds,
Yeah.
it sounds trite to say it. You can say it in one sentence, but it is a life-changing experience to really shed all of these things that you thought were you. I'm getting a visual like a body of armor that you're wearing, and each chunk of metal, you have to be like, oh, huh. Oh, yeah, that's why it kept pinching right there every time. And now I have to let this go. But you also need to put something in its place or be okay with nothing in its place, which might even
Yes.
be a lot scarier.
Yes. A lot of women struggle with uncertainty because growing up in a very defined religion, there's so much certainty. You're 100% sure the church is the only true church. You're sure about the afterlife. You're 100%. And then you leave, and there's so many choices. There's so many options. I'm uncertain. And that's not a feeling that is comfortable because you haven't had it before. Some
Yeah.
of it is being comfortable in the uncertainty, being okay not knowing. And I like what you said earlier about you're still learning things about yourself now. Who am I? I'm still learning, that's still evolving. And I feel that way too. As I have new experiences, I'm open to learning more and changing and being flexible and being open, and my opinions can change, and that's okay. Not everything is absolute. Growing up in the church, things were dichotomous, wrong, good versus bad. There was no in the middle. But what I have learned through my life experience, through my own deep dives into who I am, is that what's right for one person might not be right for someone else. There's 8 billion people on the planet. Why can't there be 8 billion right ways to be? And that's beautiful. It doesn't have to be, I'm right, so therefore you're wrong because you're not doing what I'm doing. It can be this, wow, let's learn from each other. And that's so great how that works for you. And maybe there's some pieces from that I can incorporate that feel good to me.
I'm getting a visual of an island in the middle of the ocean. And if you're hanging on to that island because you can't imagine you'll be safe if you let go, you really don't know where you're going to float to or drift to. Who are you going to be there? Who's going to look out for you? How are you going to support yourself? There's a lot of self-trust and self-faith that you must develop to be able to do that, to let go of that whole world. Was close with somebody who's very much a part of a very specific religion, and it incorporates so many different beliefs of who you should be and what is right and what is wrong. It is extremely black and white. And it's so hard to have a conversation with
Yeah.
somebody who lives that way when you don't, because
Yes.
I don't even know what to say. I can't relate to that. And I feel like I can't relate to the person underneath all of those beliefs because
Yeah.
I don't even know where this was a friend of mine from childhood. I don't even know where she is anymore. I can have compassion for why she hangs on to what she does. She would have no other way of knowing how to live. And I get that. And I can feel for her
Yes.
and I'll love her for the rest of my life. But we may never be on the same page or even be able to have much of a conversation because it's such a different way to live.
I
Yeah.
think a lot of that has to do with safety. I
Mm.
think people that really hold on to a dogma, it's unsafe to let go. So I have to hold on to this because if I let go, my whole life is going to unravel. And
Mhm.
so it's a refusal to see anything else because of the fear of being unsafe of letting it go.
Absolutely. Here's a question.
Yeah.
So you have family that are still in the church. Do you have any contact with them? Can you have conversations with them? You mentioned about having friends and they couldn't
Mhm.
relate to LDS. So it was clear that they were not part of the church. How do
Right.
you navigate having any connection with people that still are a part of that?
I still have contact with some family members, not all, but it's a different relationship now than it was. It's like you were talking about with your friend, where you can't relate and you know that a conversation wouldn't really lead anywhere because we have created the boundary that we don't talk about religion. So it's a very superficial relationship. And there are times when things happen where I start to feel emotionally triggered. Maybe I get a text message with a scriptural quote out of the blue. I have had to put up a boundary. Please don't send me those anymore. Or I get a text message with a picture of all of my Mormon family together and I wasn't invited. But the way that softens it for me is I do perspective taking, trying to understand, really be in their head. Okay, they sent me this picture, and I'm immediately feeling like I don't belong. I wasn't invited. I wasn't wanted. Okay, that could be true. But what else could be true? It could be true that this was their way of trying to include me because I wasn't there. This was their way of trying to reach out and say, wish you were here. There could be other explanations for it. The story that I'm telling in my head, my conscious brain is going to try and make that fit the story that I'm already telling myself in my head. So if I get that and I'm
Mm-hmm.
feeling like, oh, I don't belong, that's because I was already telling myself that I don't belong in my family because I've left the church. My brain's going to interpret that message to fit the story I'm already telling myself.
Yeah.
And so, what else could be true? It could be true that actually they wanted me to be there and that was their way of including me. So, that's how I deal with a lot of these family things that happen. Those are the things that help me to reframe and some perspective taking. And the relationship is not as deep as I would like it to be, but we can still have a relationship and I can still allow them to have their beliefs, these things that bring them happiness and conviction. That doesn't negate my ability to have that freedom as well.
Like not
Yeah,
abandoning yourself to be
right.
acceptable or to sound acceptable to somebody when it's really not true for you anymore.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
You mentioned grieving earlier, but wow, that would be so many things to have to grieve, not just
Yeah.
your own identity and how you related to the whole world, but now how people who were part of that world are relating to you and what you're
Yeah.
left and not left with any longer.
Yeah, because it's not like a grief of the death of a loved one. Loved one is still there, but it's a realization that your relationship is different, that you now relate to each other differently, and you're grieving what was. You used to be in line with your beliefs and your ideas, and now that's changed, and you belonged because you
Mm.
identified as Mormon, and now you don't identify that way. So it's a grief of a lot of things. I think the grief process, because the people are still living and they're still part of your life. It's a wave that comes every now and then, and there's Still a lot of work that needs to be done.
So, in the weighing out of when you're really feeling the pain of what might come across as rejection at times and the loss of your support system other than your husband versus that sense of peace and integrity with yourself, listening to yourself, recalibrating to construct your own life and your
Yeah,
own beliefs. Have you ever thought about going back? And how worth it is it to you now for all that you feel towards yourself and the life that you're creating? Is it worth it?
100% worth it. For me, it's 100% worth it because on the other side, I have experienced happiness that I never experienced in the church. I have experienced freedom I never experienced in the church. The joy and the deep connection that I have with people, with my children, was not something I could have experienced if I had stayed in the church and continued with those beliefs and continued to push myself down and continued to see myself as right and everyone else as wrong. Because the relationships that I've gained with myself and with other people, I see how it can be based on real, genuine vulnerability and safety. A few months ago, I was speaking to a coach of mine, and she said, think of a time when you felt safe. I couldn't think of one single time in my life as a child when I felt safe. I couldn't. And then she said, okay, think of a recent time when you felt safe. And I could think of a time when I felt safe recently. And that's just to illustrate the feelings that I missed as a child, growing up, pushing myself down, distrusting myself. I missed out on freedom, on happiness, on safety, on security, on real belonging, because the belonging I now look back was conditional. You belong if you follow this path. You will be loved by God if you're a good girl. You will have your reward in heaven if you endure to the end and you sacrifice in this life. Everything was conditional. My life's not conditional now. I can love who I choose to love. I love my kids without conditions. It's just a whole new level that I didn't know existed before.
This reminds me a bit of when we go off to college. We grow up in a town and in our family, and then we go off to college and hopefully we find our people at some point, especially when you don't feel like you really fit in or belonged where you grew up. When you're describing belonging, I'm feeling aware of it's the idea between membership versus intrinsic self.
That's a very good way to think of it.
I love that you're doing this work, all the toiling that you've done. I'm getting a flash of the statue of David. People ask, how did you know how to create David? Basically, Michelangelo said with that piece of marble, he chiseled away everything that wasn't David. And that's what was left.
Oh,
And
how beautiful is that?
you've done that and you're continuing. And I would question you if you felt like you were done. I'm 58. I'm still unraveling things, beliefs that don't suit me or my belief system or behaviors, patterns that I still get stuck in that I'm like, what am I doing? Why am I feeling so anxious? What am I tying into? What is really going on here? I feel like that's a lifelong process. And I hope that it is in a good way because you continue to evolve away from the slab of marble and you just become the David and you're helping other women do this. Do you think you would do this with people who aren't just Mormon moms leaving the church? It's okay to have your niche because you have so much rich experience from there. But do you think you could also apply that to people from maybe other religions or other cultures or family
I
culture?
think the work that I do can be applied to so many different situations and people coming out of any other religion or culture or family experience or traumatic experience, like even narcissistic relationships, people coming out of that, right? I think things I do can be applied to a wide variety of circumstances and life situations. My passion is helping ex-Mormon moms. Maybe in the future I'll expand that, but for now, that's the demographic that really has a place in my heart.
Totally get that. Okay.
Yeah.
For everybody who knows somebody, or if you are somebody in this situation, please check out Audra's information.
My business name is Mama Audra. And so I have a website, mamaaudra.com. And on there, there's a free masterclass that's the 5 shifts every former Mormon mom needs to make. So you can watch the masterclass, and if that resonates, then you can schedule a call with me and we can talk about my Reclaimed program. I'm also on all the socials too as Mama Audra.
And that's M-A-M-A, Mama?
Yeah, M-A-M-A. Yeah.
Mama Audra.
Yeah.
Lovely. It was so interesting to talk to you, and thank you for the inspiration that you bring in all of this shedding and reevaluating and really becoming that true, authentic version of yourself.
Thank you for having me. You create this safe space to share stories. Thank you.
You're so welcome. I'm glad that we had this conversation. Please keep Mama Audra in mind for yourself and others, because there's precious experience and know-how with Audra. I wish you all the best in your business and all the clients you're going to help. I'm excited for them to find you.
Thank you.
You're so welcome. Take care. Thanks for spending this time with me on Mediumship Sparks. If this episode resonated with you, please like it, subscribe, rate, and certainly share it with somebody else who could benefit. If you're interested in any support I might be able to provide as you navigate your spiritual path, please feel free to check out my offerings at connectingwithnoel.com and reach out at mediumshipcast@gmail.com. Take good care of yourself, and I'll look forward to being with you again soon.